The dress uniform hung perfectly, every ribbon in place, every crease sharp enough to cut glass. But none of that mattered when my own brother looked me up and down at his wedding rehearsal dinner and said, "Still playing dress-up, I see." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When are you going to get a real job like normal people? The entire table went silent. His fiancée, Rebecca, shifted uncomfortably. Her father, Admiral Richardson, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That moment would haunt my brother for years to come, but he didn't know it yet. My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, and for most of my adult life, I've worn the uniform of the United States Navy with pride. But growing up, my older brother Marcus never saw it that way. To him, I was still the awkward kid sister who couldn't throw a baseball straight, who chose books over parties, who enlisted in the military instead of following him into the family real estate business. What Marcus never understood was that some people are called to serve something bigger than themselves, even when their own family can't see the value in it. The tension between us started early. Marcus was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Star quarterback in high school, business degree from state, took over Dad's real estate company right out of college. He made money, lots of it, and in our family, that was the ultimate measure of success. When I announced at 18 that I was joining the Navy, Dad actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that cuts right through you. "Sarah's going through a phase," he told his golf buddies. "She'll be back in a year, maybe 2, ready to settle down and start a real life." That was 12 years ago. I never came back, not in the way they expected. Instead, I threw myself into my service with everything I had. Boot camp, officer candidate school, specialized training in naval intelligence, deployment after deployment. I learned languages, earned commendations, led teams of brilliant men and women who respected the uniform and what it represented. But every time I came home on leave, Marcus had the same joke ready. "How's the toy soldier business treating you, sis?" It stung every single time, but I learned to brush it off. I told myself he didn't understand, that civilian life had made him soft, that he was just intimidated by my success. But deep down, I knew the truth was simpler and more painful. My own brother was embarrassed by me. He introduced me to his friends as my sister who's still figuring things out, or Sarah, she's in the military for now. Never Lieutenant Chen, never with pride. Always with that subtle suggestion that this was temporary, that I was somehow less than because I chose service over profit. The worst part wasn't just Marcus. It was watching our parents nod, along with his assessment. When he bought his second house, they threw him a party. When I got promoted to lieutenant commander, Mom mentioned it briefly over dinner, and then immediately changed the subject to ask when I was going to settle down and give them grandchildren. The message was clear. His achievements mattered, mine were just expensive hobbies funded by taxpayers. I started dreading family gatherings. Christmas became an annual reminder of how little my family understood or valued what I did. Marcus would talk about his latest property deals, his new car, his golf handicap, while I sat quietly in my civilian clothes, trying not to think about the classified operations I'd been part of, the lives we'd saved, the intelligence we'd gathered that kept Americans safe. But none of that translated into dinner table conversation, and none of it earned me the respect I craved from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The breaking point came when Marcus announced his engagement to Rebecca Richardson. I was happy for him, genuinely. Rebecca was kind, intelligent, well-educated, and she seemed to genuinely care about him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. But Marcus couldn't resist turning even his engagement announcement into another opportunity to diminish me. "Finally found someone who appreciates success," he said, looking pointedly at me. "Rebecca's dad is Admiral Richardson, you know, from the Naval Academy. Real military, not just playing around like some people." That comment hit differently because Admiral Richardson wasn't just any officer. He was a legend in naval circles, a man who'd commanded carrier battle groups, served as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, earned medals I could only dream of. The fact that Marcus was using his future father-in-law's genuine service to mock mine showed just how little he understood about either of us. But I bit my tongue, congratulated them both, and tried to focus on Rebecca's happiness rather than my brother's cruelty. The wedding planning process was torture. Every conversation somehow circled back to how successful Marcus was, how proud our parents were of him, how lucky Rebecca was to marry such an accomplished man. I was asked to be a bridesmaid, of course, but even that felt like charity. "Sarah can afford the dress, right?" Marcus asked Rebecca within my earshot. "Military salary isn't much, but bridesmaid dresses are pretty cheap." I wanted to tell him about my savings account, about the combat pay and hazard duty pay he knew nothing about the fact that I'd probably saved more money in my 12 years of service than he'd made profit in his best year. But I didn't. I just smiled and assured Rebecca that I could handle whatever she needed. Because despite everything, I loved my brother, and I wanted his wedding to be perfect. The rehearsal dinner was held at the country club where Marcus played golf, a place that screamed old money and established success. All his business partners were there, along with Rebecca's family, who'd flown in from various parts of the country. Admiral Richardson was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, distinguished, with the bearing of a man who'd commanded respect his entire life. He was polite to everyone, but I noticed how his eyes took in details. How he listened more than he spoke. How he seemed to be constantly assessing the people around him. I'd worn my dress uniform to the dinner, not to show off, but because Rebecca had specifically requested it. "I think it would mean a lot to my father," she'd said quietly. "He has such respect for service members, and I know he'd love to meet you properly." So there I was, navy dress blues immaculate, ribbons precisely placed, feeling both proud and vulnerable, as I walked into a room full of people who'd probably never given military service a second thought. Marcus took one look at me, and his expression soured. I could see him thinking, could practically hear the gears turning as he decided this was somehow an attempt to steal attention from his big day. He worked his way over to where I was standing with Rebecca and her younger sister, that familiar smirk already forming on his face. "Still playing dress-up, I see," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "When are you going to get a real job like normal people?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's face went red with embarrassment and anger. Her sister looked mortified. Other guests turned to stare, not quite believing what they'd just heard. I felt every eye in the room on me, felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in my chest. This was his wedding weekend, and he'd chosen to mock my service in front of everyone who mattered to him. But before I could respond, before I could even process what had just happened, Admiral Richardson appeared beside us. I hadn't seen him approach, but suddenly he was there, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Marcus with the kind of stare that had probably terrified junior officers for decades, then turned to me with an expression that completely transformed. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he said, and his voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." The way he said my rank, with such respect and authority, made every person within earshot straighten unconsciously. Marcus's smirk faltered as he realized that this wasn't going the way he'd planned. Rebecca's father, the man whose approval he'd been desperately seeking for months, was treating me with a deference that Marcus had never shown. "Sir," I replied, extending my hand, "it's an honor to meet you." Admiral Richardson didn't just shake my hand, he held it while he spoke, his eyes never leaving mine. "The honor is mine, Lieutenant Commander. Rebecca tells me you're naval intelligence, currently stationed at Norfolk." "Yes, sir. Cryptologic technician route, cross-trained in human intelligence operations." His eyebrows rose slightly, and I saw something like approval flash across his features. CTN to human is quite a career progression. That speaks to exceptional performance evaluations. Marcus was starting to look confused, like he was watching a conversation in a foreign language. He'd probably never heard military acronyms used with such casual expertise, had no idea that Admiral Richardson was essentially commenting on my career in terms that indicated both knowledge and respect. "I've been fortunate in my assignments, sir. Good leadership makes all the difference." "Indeed it does." Admiral Richardson finally released my hand, but his attention remained focused on me. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander, what's your assessment of our current posture in the South China Sea?" This was a test, I realized. Not of my knowledge, though that was part of it, but of my credibility. Admiral Richardson was giving me an opportunity to demonstrate that I wasn't just wearing a costume, that the uniform meant something, that I deserved the respect my own brother refused to give me. I spent the next 10 minutes discussing maritime strategy, Chinese naval expansion, and intelligence challenges in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Richardson asked pointed questions, made thoughtful observations, and treated me as an equal, in a conversation that was clearly above the heads of everyone else in the room. Marcus stood beside us, his earlier confidence evaporating as he realized he was completely out of his depth. When our conversation naturally concluded, Admiral Richardson turned to address the room. His voice carried that particular authority that comes from decades of command, and every person there instinctively quieted to listen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone special in our midst tonight. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen represents the very best of our naval service. Intelligence officers like her work in the shadows, often without recognition, to keep all of us safe. The operations she's been part of, the information she's helped gather and analyze, directly contributes to the security of our nation and our allies. He paused, letting that sink in, then continued. In my 40 years of service, I've had the privilege of working with many outstanding officers. Lieutenant Commander Chen, based on what I know of your record and what I've observed tonight, you exemplify the values and excellence our Navy strives for. It's officers like you who give me confidence in the future of our service. The room was absolutely silent. Admiral Richardson then did something that made my heart nearly stop. He came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. In civilian clothes, at his daughter's rehearsal dinner, this distinguished officer was saluting me in front of my entire family and all of my brother's friends. I returned the salute, fighting back tears that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with finally being seen for who I really was by someone who understood. When we lowered our hands, the room erupted in applause. Real applause. The kind that comes from people who just witnessed something significant even if they didn't fully understand it. Marcus stood frozen beside us, his face cycling through a dozen different expressions: confusion, embarrassment, realization, and something that might have been shame. He'd just watched his future father-in-law, a man whose respect he desperately wanted, honor the sister he'd been mocking for over a decade. Rebecca was crying, proud tears streaming down her face. Her mother was beaming. Her younger sister was looking at me like I'd just stepped out of a movie. And my parents, sitting at a nearby table, looked stunned. They'd just seen their daughter receive recognition from one of the most respected military leaders in the country. And maybe for the first time, they were starting to understand what they'd been dismissing all these years. Admiral Richardson wasn't finished. He placed a hand on my shoulder and spoke again, but this time his voice was gentler, more personal. Lieutenant Commander, I served with many fine officers during my career, but few impressed me as much as you have tonight. Your parents should be extraordinarily proud. Your country certainly is. Then he turned to Marcus, and his expression shifted back to that command authority. Son, you have a remarkable sister. I hope you realize how fortunate you are. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the weight of 4 decades of military leadership. And Marcus knew he'd been found wanting. He mumbled something that might have been agreement, but his earlier arrogance was completely gone. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People who'd barely acknowledged me before were suddenly interested in my experiences, my travels, my work. Other veterans in the room, including Rebecca's uncle who'd served in the Marine Corps, sought me out to share stories and express gratitude. I found myself surrounded by genuine respect and curiosity, the kind I'd been craving from my family for years. But the most significant moment came later, when Marcus approached me as the evening was winding down. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the realization of how badly he'd misjudged both me and the situation. Sarah, he said quietly, I need to talk to you. We stepped outside onto the country club's terrace, away from the crowd and the noise. For a long moment, he just stared out at the golf course, gathering his thoughts. I had no idea, he finally said, about any of it. About what you do, about how important it is, about how respected you are. I wanted to be angry, wanted to let loose all the hurt and frustration I'd been carrying for years. But looking at him, seeing genuine remorse, for maybe the first time in our adult relationship, I found myself feeling something different. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Marcus, I've tried to tell you. For 12 years, I've tried to help you understand. I know, and I'm sorry. I don't know what I thought. That you were just hiding from real responsibility, maybe. That military service was something people did when they couldn't make it in the real world. He turned to look at me directly. Admiral Richardson pulled me aside after dinner. He told me things about naval intelligence, about what officers like you actually do. Sarah, he said, you probably can't even tell us about some of your most important work because it's classified. I nodded. There were operations, analyses, intelligence products that I'd never be able to discuss with anyone outside my security clearance level. The work that mattered most was often the work that remained invisible. He also told me, Marcus continued, that officers at your level, with your qualifications and experience, could easily transition to private sector jobs making 3 times what I make in real estate. He said you stay in uniform because you believe in something bigger than profit. That conversation with Admiral Richardson had been eye-opening for Marcus in ways I was only beginning to understand. For the first time in his life, he'd met someone whose opinion he respected, someone successful and accomplished in his own right, who saw value in what I did. It was shaking everything he thought he knew about success and worth. I've been an ass, he said simply, a complete ass, for years, and tonight, in front of everyone who matters to me, I showed exactly how ignorant I am about my own sister's life. The apology was a start, but I knew it would take more than words to rebuild what had been broken between us. Years of dismissal and mockery don't disappear with one conversation, no matter how sincere. Marcus, I appreciate you saying that, but this isn't just about tonight. This is about every family gathering where you made me feel small. Every time you introduced me like I was some kind of failure. Every time you suggested that my service was just a phase I'd grow out of. He nodded, looking genuinely pained. I know. And I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Rebecca's been telling me I was wrong about you for months, but I was too stubborn to listen. Too invested in being right to consider that maybe I didn't understand what I was talking about. The mention of Rebecca reminded me that this was supposed to be a celebration of their upcoming marriage, not a moment of reckoning between siblings. But maybe that's what made it more significant. This wasn't just about Marcus and me anymore. It was about the kind of man he wanted to be for his future wife, the kind of family we wanted to build together. What does Rebecca think about all this? I asked. Marcus's expression grew even more serious. She's furious with me. Told me she's ashamed of how I treated you tonight. Said if I couldn't respect you, how could she trust me to respect her when things get difficult? That sounded like Rebecca. I'd always liked her directness, her unwillingness to accept behavior that didn't meet her standards. If she was holding Marcus accountable, that was probably more effective than anything I could say. She's right to be angry, I said. What you did tonight was cruel, Marcus. And it wasn't the first time. I know. And Sarah, I'm going to do better, not just apologize, but actually change how I think about this, how I talk about your service. I want to understand what you do, what it means to you, why it matters. We talked for another hour on that terrace. The longest substantive conversation we'd had since we were children. I told him about my deployments, about the satisfaction of solving intelligence puzzles that helped keep ships and sailors safe. I explained the training, the responsibility, the weight of carrying classified information that could affect national security. I helped him understand that military service wasn't about playing dress-up or avoiding real work. It was about dedicating your life to something larger than yourself. In return, Marcus shared things I'd never heard before. How he'd always felt pressure to be the successful son, to carry on the family business, to make the kind of money that proved he was worthy of respect. How he'd been intimidated by my confidence, my willingness to leave home and build a life on my own terms. How he'd used mockery to cover up his own insecurities about whether he was making a real difference in the world. It wasn't a complete healing. Years of hurt don't disappear in one conversation. But it was a beginning, a foundation we could build on if we both committed to doing the work. The wedding ceremony 2 days later was beautiful. Marcus and Rebecca exchanged vows in the base chapel at Norfolk, a detail that Rebecca had insisted on after meeting me. Admiral Richardson walked his daughter down the aisle in his dress uniform, and several other military guests wore theirs as well. I stood with the other bridesmaids, proud to be part of celebrating their love. But the moment that meant the most came during the reception. Marcus stood to give his speech as the new husband, thanking guests and expressing his love for Rebecca. Midway through, he paused and looked directly at me. I also want to take a moment to honor my sister, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. For too many years, I failed to appreciate her service to our country and the sacrifices she's made to keep all of us safe. Sarah, you've dedicated your life to something bigger than yourself, and I'm proud to call you my sister. Thank you for your service and thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. Admiral Richardson caught my eye from across the room and nodded approvingly. Rebecca was beaming, clearly proud of her new husband's growth. And for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged in my own family. The change in Marcus wasn't immediate or complete. Old habits die hard, and rebuilding trust takes time. But over the following months, I watched him make genuine efforts to understand and respect my career. He started asking thoughtful questions about my work, within the bounds of what I could share. He stopped making jokes about military service and started defending it when others made dismissive comments. Most importantly, he began introducing me properly. This is my sister, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. She's Naval Intelligence, stationed at Norfolk. Simple words, but they carried weight because they came with respect instead of embarrassment. The real test came 6 months later, at our father's birthday party. The same extended family and family friends who'd heard years of Marcus's dismissive comments about my career were gathered around the dining room table. Uncle Bob, who'd always been particularly vocal about military spending being a waste of taxpayer money, started in on his usual rant about government employees living off the public dime. I braced myself for the familiar sting of being lumped in with his generalizations about lazy government workers. But before I could even respond, Marcus set down his fork and looked directly at his uncle. Bob, you're talking about my sister. Lieutenant Commander Chen has spent over a decade serving our country in naval intelligence. She's earned commendations for her work in operations that helped prevent terrorist attacks. She's fluent in 3 languages, holds a top-secret security clearance, and could make a lot more money in the private sector but chooses to serve instead. Maybe you should reconsider your sweeping statements about people who dedicate their lives to keeping us safe. The table went silent. Uncle Bob looked stunned, not just by the correction but by the authority in Marcus's voice. Our parents exchanged glances, clearly surprised by their son's passionate defense of his sister. And I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of tension I'd carried for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be without it. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside. Sarah, I owe you an apology, we all do. I don't think we ever really understood what you were doing, what it meant, what you'd accomplished. Marcus has been educating us, and I'm embarrassed by how ignorant we've been. It was a conversation long overdue, and like with Marcus, it wasn't a complete healing but a necessary beginning. My parents started asking about my work, my deployments, my goals within the Navy. They began to see my service as a career worthy of respect, rather than a phase I'd eventually outgrow. The transformation wasn't just in my family. Admiral Richardson, true to form, had made some inquiries about my record and performance. A few months after the wedding, I received orders for a prestigious assignment to the Pentagon, working on strategic intelligence analysis. The position typically went to more senior officers, but Admiral Richardson's recommendation had carried significant weight. Merit-based assignment. He told me over coffee when I called to thank him. Your record speaks for itself, Lieutenant Commander. I just made sure the right people were aware of your capabilities. Working at the Pentagon opened doors I'd never imagined. I found myself briefing senior leaders, contributing to strategic decisions, working on intelligence products that directly influenced national security policy. The work was challenging and meaningful in ways that validated every sacrifice I'd made for my career. But perhaps more importantly, I'd found my voice within my own family. The respect I'd always craved from my parents and brother was finally there. But I'd also learned that I didn't need their validation to know my worth. The uniform I wore, the work I did, the service I gave to my country had value independent of their recognition. Marcus and Rebecca's marriage thrived built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that extended to how they treated the people around them. Their first child, a daughter they named Elena, became the apple of everyone's eye. And when she was old enough to understand, Marcus made sure she knew that her Aunt Sarah was a hero, someone who served their country with honor and distinction. Years later, at Elena's 5th birthday party, she announced that she wanted to be just like Aunt Sarah when she grew up. Marcus beamed with pride as he told her about the Naval Academy, about service, about dedicating your life to something bigger than yourself. The man who'd once mocked military service was now encouraging his daughter to consider it as a noble calling. "You know what the best part is?" Rebecca said to me quietly as we watched Marcus help Elena play with her toy Navy ships. "He's not just supporting her interest because it's what she wants. He genuinely believes now that military service is honorable, important work." You changed how he sees the world, Sarah. I thought about that conversation often in the years that followed. How one moment of public recognition from someone Marcus respected had shifted his entire worldview. How Admiral Richardson's simple gesture of saluting me had forced my brother to confront his own prejudices and ignorance. How sometimes it takes an outside voice to help family members hear what we've been trying to tell them all along. The story could have ended with revenge. I could have used Admiral Richardson's respect and Marcus's public humiliation to make him pay for years of dismissiveness. I could have rubbed his face in his mistake, made him grovel, extracted punishment for all the hurt he'd caused. But that's not what service teaches you. Military life, at its best, is about something larger than personal grievances. It's about duty, honor, sacrifice, and the understanding that we're all stronger when we work together rather than tear each other down. The uniform I wore represented values that demanded better of me than petty revenge. Instead, I chose grace. I chose to give Marcus the opportunity to grow, to learn, to become a better man and brother. I chose to rebuild rather than destroy, to forgive rather than punish. Not because he deserved it immediately, but because that's what healing required from both of us. The lesson I learned wasn't just about family dynamics or military respect. It was about the power of authentic recognition, the importance of understanding before judging, and the possibility of transformation when people are willing to do the hard work of changing their perspectives. Today, when I look back on that rehearsal dinner, I don't remember the sting of Marcus's mockery or the embarrassment of being diminished in front of strangers. I remember Admiral Richardson's salute, the respect in his voice when he spoke about my service, and the moment when my own family finally saw me for who I really was. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who have the hardest time seeing our worth. Sometimes it takes an outside voice, someone they respect, to help them understand what they've been missing. And sometimes, if we're lucky and willing to do the work, those moments of recognition can transform relationships that seemed beyond repair. The dress uniform still hangs in my closet, every ribbon in place, every crease sharp. But now when I wear it, I know that the people who matter most see it the way Admiral Richardson did that night, as a symbol of service, sacrifice, and honor, as proof that some things are worth more than money, more valuable than comfort, more important than personal glory. My brother called me a loser until his Admiral father-in-law saluted me. But the real victory wasn't in proving Marcus wrong, it was in finding the grace to help him become right. The morning after the rehearsal dinner brought phone calls I wasn't expecting. My commanding officer, Captain Morrison, contacted me personally to inform me that Admiral Richardson had reached out to discuss my performance record and potential for advanced assignments. This wasn't standard protocol, and it certainly wasn't something that happened because of casual dinner conversation. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," Captain Morrison said, his voice carrying that particular tone of curiosity mixed with respect that I'd learned to recognize over the years. "It seems you made quite an impression last night. Admiral Richardson specifically mentioned your grasp of current intelligence challenges in the Pacific Theater and your strategic thinking capabilities. I found myself in the unusual position of having to explain a family wedding to my commanding officer. Sir, the Admiral is my brother's new father-in-law." We had an opportunity to discuss operational matters during the rehearsal dinner. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear Captain Morrison processing this information. Lieutenant Commander, in my 25 years of service, I've rarely seen a flag officer take such initiative based on a single conversation. Whatever you discussed, it clearly demonstrated capabilities that align with some very specific needs we have at higher levels. The conversation that followed changed the trajectory of my career in ways I couldn't have imagined. Captain Morrison explained that Admiral Richardson had specifically inquired about my availability for a joint task force being assembled to address emerging threats in maritime cybersecurity. The position would require someone with my unique combination of cryptologic background and human intelligence experience, along with the ability to brief senior leadership on complex technical matters. This is a fast-track assignment, Lieutenant Commander. The kind that typically goes to officers with more time and grade. But Admiral Richardson was very specific about wanting someone with your particular skill set and demonstrated ability to communicate complex intelligence matters to senior leadership. I realized that our dinner conversation had been more than just polite military talk. Admiral Richardson had been conducting an informal assessment, testing not just my knowledge but my ability to articulate complex strategic concepts to non-experts. The fact that I'd been able to discuss South China Sea operations in terms that impressed a former Deputy Chief of Naval Operations while remaining accessible to civilians had apparently demonstrated exactly the kind of communication skills this new position required. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Marcus had dismissed my military service as meaningless, but his own wedding had become the catalyst for a career opportunity that would put me at the forefront of some of the Navy's most critical work. The brother who'd mocked me for playing dress-up had inadvertently created the circumstances that would accelerate my professional growth beyond anything I'd planned. But the phone calls didn't stop with Captain Morrison. Throughout the week following the wedding, I received contacts from people I'd never spoken to before. A Rear Admiral's aide called to schedule a meeting. The Intelligence Community Liaison Office reached out about potential cross-training opportunities. Even the Naval War College contacted me about guest lecturing possibilities. It became clear that Admiral Richardson's recognition hadn't been a simple gesture of courtesy. He'd actively begun advocating for my career advancement, making calls and recommendations that were opening doors I'd never even known existed. This wasn't just about one moment of respect at a family dinner. It was about a senior leader using his influence to ensure that capable officers received opportunities commensurate with their abilities. The realization was both thrilling and overwhelming. I'd spent my entire career working within established channels, earning advancement through steady performance and gradual recognition. This sudden acceleration felt like being launched from a catapult, exciting but also disorienting. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the rehearsal dinner was creating its own ripple effects within my family. My mother called 3 days after the Tubulan wedding, her voice carrying a tone I hadn't heard since childhood, when she was genuinely proud of something I'd accomplished. "Sarah, honey, I've been thinking about what Admiral Richardson said the other night. About your work, about what you do for the country. I realize we've never really asked you to explain it to us, never tried to understand what your service means." The conversation that followed was one of the most meaningful I'd ever had with my mother. For the first time in years, she asked detailed questions about my career, my deployments, the nature of intelligence work. She wanted to understand not just what I did, but why it mattered, how it felt to carry the responsibility of classified information that could affect national security. "I think we've been intimidated," she admitted, "by how serious and important your work is." It felt easier to treat it like something temporary rather than trying to understand something so far outside our experience. I found myself explaining aspects of military life that I'd never thought to share with my family. The weight of command responsibility, the satisfaction of solving complex intelligence puzzles, the bonds formed with fellow service members who understood the unique pressures of our work. For the first time, my mother seemed to grasp that military service wasn't something I was doing until I figured out what I really wanted. It was exactly what I was meant to do. The conversation with my father came later that week, and it was perhaps even more significant. Dad had always measured success in financial terms, and he'd never understood why I'd chosen a career path that prioritized service over profit. But Admiral Richardson's comments about private sector opportunities had clearly made an impression. "Sarah, I need to apologize," he said without preamble when he called. "Admiral Richardson mentioned that someone with your qualifications could easily make significantly more money in the civilian sector. The fact that you choose to stay in uniform, to serve your country instead of pursuing maximum financial gain, that says something about your character that I should have recognized years ago." It was a profound shift in how my father viewed not just my career but the concept of success itself. For the first time, he was seeing service and sacrifice as valuable in their own right, not just as stepping stones to something more profitable. "I've been thinking about my own father," he continued. "Your grandfather served in Korea, and when he came back, he never talked about it much. I think I inherited some of his reluctance to discuss military service, but I never understood that his silence came from respect for the gravity of what he'd experienced, not from shame or regret." These conversations with my parents represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamics. For years, I'd felt like an outsider at family gatherings, like my experiences and values were incompatible with theirs. But Admiral Richardson's recognition had created space for genuine dialogue, for understanding rather than dismissal. The professional opportunities continued to unfold. The Joint Task Force position Admiral Richardson had mentioned materialized into a formal offer within 2 weeks of the wedding. The assignment would take me to Washington, D.C., working directly with senior leadership from multiple services and intelligence agencies on some of the most challenging cybersecurity threats facing the Navy. Captain Morrison called personally to discuss the opportunity. "Lieutenant Commander, this is the kind of assignment that can define a career. The work you'd be doing would directly influence policy at the highest levels of government. But I want you to understand what you'd be taking on." He explained that the position would require regular briefings to flag officers and civilian leadership, including potential for appearances before congressional committees. The work would be highly classified, intellectually demanding, and politically sensitive. Success in this role could lead to accelerated promotion and positions of significant responsibility within the intelligence community. The recommendation came directly from Admiral Richardson. Captain Morrison continued, "But the selection board reviewed your entire record, and they believe you have the unique combination of technical expertise, analytical capability, and communication skills necessary for this level of responsibility." I accepted the position without hesitation. This was the kind of opportunity that most officers could only dream of, and I knew that Admiral Richardson's advocacy had been instrumental in making it possible. But more than that, it felt like validation of everything I'd worked toward throughout my career. The skills I'd developed, the experiences I'd accumulated, the sacrifices I'd made, were all leading to this moment of being trusted with work that truly mattered. The assignment began 6 weeks later, and it immediately became clear that Admiral Richardson's assessment of my capabilities had been accurate. The work was challenging in ways I'd never experienced, requiring me to synthesize complex technical information from multiple sources and present actionable intelligence to leaders who needed to make critical decisions based on my analysis. My first major briefing was to a room full of flag officers and senior civilian officials, including the Secretary of the Navy. Standing at the podium in that Pentagon conference room, presenting intelligence assessments that would influence multi-billion-dollar defense decisions, I thought about Marcus's comment at the rehearsal dinner. "Still playing dress-up," he'd said. If only he could see me now, briefing the Secretary of the Navy on threats that could affect the security of the entire Pacific Fleet. The briefing went exceptionally well. My presentation was clear, comprehensive, and actionable. During the question-and-answer session, I was able to provide detailed responses that demonstrated not just technical knowledge, but strategic understanding. Afterward, the Secretary personally thanked me for the quality of the analysis and presentation. But the moment that meant the most came when Admiral Richardson, who'd been present for the briefing as part of his ongoing advisory role, approached me afterward. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander. That briefing exemplified exactly why I recommended you for this position. Your ability to translate complex intelligence into clear, actionable recommendations is exceptional." He paused, then added something that surprised me. "I've been following your career since the wedding, not just because you're family now, but because officers with your capabilities are rare." The Navy needs leaders who can bridge the gap between technical expertise and strategic thinking. You're already doing that at a level that most officers don't reach until much later in their careers. The recognition from Admiral Richardson was professionally gratifying, but what struck me most was how naturally he'd said, "Because you're family now." The man who'd saluted me at Marcus's rehearsal dinner had genuinely welcomed me into his extended family, not just as his daughter's sister-in-law, but as a fellow service member worthy of his mentorship and support. This sense of belonging extended beyond professional relationships. The wedding had introduced me to Rebecca's extended family, many of whom had military connections spanning multiple generations. I found myself part of a network of current and former service members who understood the unique challenges and rewards of military life in ways that my biological family never had. Rebecca's uncle, Colonel Martinez, who'd served multiple deployments in the Marine Corps, became a valuable mentor and friend. Her cousin, who worked as a civilian contractor supporting military intelligence operations, provided insights into potential career paths I'd never considered. These relationships filled a gap I hadn't even realized existed in my life. But perhaps the most significant relationship that developed was with Admiral Richardson himself. What had begun as a formal introduction at a family wedding evolved into a genuine mentorship that would influence my career for years to come. He made time for regular check-ins, offered guidance on professional development, and provided insights into the strategic thinking that shaped naval policy at the highest levels. During one of our quarterly coffee meetings, Admiral Richardson shared something that helped me understand why he'd taken such immediate interest in my career. "Lieutenant Commander, when I met you at the rehearsal dinner, I saw something that reminded me of myself as a young officer. Not just the technical competence or the dedication to service, but the isolation that comes from being surrounded by people who don't understand what you do or why it matters." He explained that his own family had struggled to understand his military career, particularly during his early years when deployments and assignments kept him away from home for extended periods. It wasn't until I reached flag rank that my civilian relatives began to grasp the significance of military service. But by then, I'd spent decades feeling like an outsider at family gatherings. This revelation helped me understand that Admiral Richardson's recognition at the rehearsal dinner had been about more than just professional courtesy. He'd seen a younger version of himself in me, someone whose service was being dismissed by the very people who should have been most proud of it. His public salute hadn't just been about honoring my service, it had been about ensuring that I didn't have to wait decades for family recognition the way he had. The mentorship Admiral Richardson provided went beyond career advice. He helped me understand the broader context of naval service, the way individual assignments and achievements contributed to larger strategic objectives. He taught me to think not just about my immediate responsibilities, but about how my work fit into the Navy's long-term mission and goals. "Intelligence officers like yourself are force multipliers," he explained during one of our conversations. "The analysis you provide, the insights you generate, they influence decisions that affect thousands of sailors and millions of civilians. Understanding that broader impact is what separates good officers from exceptional leaders." This perspective transformed how I approached my work. Instead of focusing solely on the technical aspects of intelligence analysis, I began to consider the strategic implications of my recommendations. I started thinking about how my briefings could be more effective, how my analysis could be more actionable, how my communication could better serve the decision-makers who relied on my expertise. The results were immediate and measurable. My briefings became more influential. My recommendations were implemented more frequently, and my reputation within the intelligence community grew rapidly. Senior leaders began specifically requesting my analysis on complex issues, and I found myself invited to participate in strategic planning sessions that shaped naval policy. But success in Washington also meant increased visibility, and with that came attention I hadn't anticipated. Military publications began featuring articles about innovative approaches to intelligence analysis, often highlighting work that I'd contributed to without naming me directly due to classification requirements. Professional organizations invited me to speak at conferences and symposiums. The recognition was gratifying, but it also created an interesting dynamic when I returned home for family visits. My parents and Marcus were beginning to understand not just that my military service was legitimate and important, but that I was achieving significant success within that field. The sister and daughter they'd once viewed as avoiding real responsibility was now briefing senior government officials and influencing national security policy. Marcus's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The brother who'd mocked my dress-up career began asking thoughtful questions about my work, within the bounds of what I could discuss. He started reading military publications and news articles about naval operations, trying to understand the context of what I did. Most significantly, he began defending military service when others made dismissive comments. I witnessed this firsthand during a family barbecue 6 months after the wedding. One of Dad's golf partners, a man who'd always been vocal about his opinions on government spending, started his usual complaints about military budgets and defense contractors. "These people are just living off taxpayer money," he declared, clearly intending to provoke an argument. "Half of them probably couldn't make it in the private sector anyway." Before I could respond, Marcus set down his beer and turned to face the man directly. "Jim, you're talking about my sister. Lieutenant Commander Chen has a top-secret security clearance, speaks 3 languages, and regularly briefs senior government officials on threats to national security. She could easily make twice what you do in the private sector, but she chooses to serve her country instead. Maybe you should think before you insult people who sacrifice their personal financial gain to keep the rest of us safe." The barbecue went quiet. Dad's golf partner looked stunned, clearly not having expected such a forceful response from Marcus. But what struck me most was the authority in my brother's voice, the genuine pride and protectiveness he'd expressed. The man who'd once been embarrassed by my military service was now my fiercest defender. Later that evening, Marcus and I found ourselves alone on the back porch, watching the sunset and processing the day's events. "You know," he said quietly, "I think I understand now why Admiral Richardson saluted you that night. It wasn't just about recognizing your service. It was about showing respect for someone who's dedicated their life to something bigger than themselves." He paused, then continued. "I spent so many years measuring success by bank account balances and material possessions. But watching you these past months, seeing the respect you command from people like Admiral Richardson, understanding the importance of what you do, it's made me realize that real success is about making a difference that matters." This wasn't just an apology for past dismissiveness. It was a fundamental shift in Marcus's understanding of value and achievement. The brother who'd once mocked military service was now expressing genuine admiration for the sacrifices and commitment it required. "I've been thinking about Elena," he said, referring to his infant daughter, "about what kind of example I want to set for her, what values I want to teach her. I want her to grow up understanding that service and sacrifice are noble callings, that there are things worth more than money or comfort." The conversation represented a complete reversal from the rehearsal dinner 9 months earlier. Marcus had evolved from someone who mocked military service to someone who wanted to instill respect for it in his daughter. The change wasn't just surface-level politeness. It reflected a genuine transformation in his worldview. This transformation extended beyond just my immediate family. Extended relatives who'd heard Marcus's defense at the barbecue began approaching me with new interest and respect. Cousins who'd barely acknowledged my career before started asking about my experiences and expressing pride in having a family member in military service. The ripple effects even reached my workplace, where colleagues began commenting on the visible increase in my confidence and communication skills. The support I was finally receiving from my family had eliminated a source of stress I'd carried for years, allowing me to focus more completely on my professional responsibilities. Captain Morrison noticed the change during one of our regular meetings. "Lieutenant Commander, I don't know what's happened in your personal life recently, but whatever it is, it's translated into exceptional professional performance. Your last 3 briefings have been among the best I've seen from any officer at your level." I explained how my family's newfound understanding and support had affected my overall confidence and well-being. Captain Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "It's remarkable how much our personal relationships can impact our professional effectiveness. When you feel supported and valued at home, it shows in every aspect of your work." The assignment in Washington continued to provide opportunities for growth and achievement that exceeded my expectations. I was selected to participate in a joint intelligence exercise with allied navies, travel to international conferences as a subject matter expert, and contribute to strategic assessments that influenced naval doctrine development. Each success reinforced Admiral Richardson's initial assessment of my capabilities, while also validating my family's growing pride in my service. The career acceleration that had begun with his salute at the rehearsal dinner was creating a momentum that transformed not just my professional trajectory, but my entire sense of identity and belonging. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came in an unexpected form. Admiral Richardson called me personally to inform me that I'd been selected for promotion to commander, a full year ahead of my projected timeline. The early promotion was based on exceptional performance and demonstrated leadership potential, much of it in assignments that had resulted from his initial recommendation. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. Or should I say Commander-Select Chen? "This promotion represents recognition of your exceptional service and potential for future leadership. But more than that, it validates my assessment that night at the rehearsal dinner. You exemplify everything the Navy should value in its officers." The promotion ceremony was scheduled for 3 months later, and Admiral Richardson offered to conduct the ceremony personally. "It would be my honor," he said, "to pin on your new rank insignia." In many ways, this promotion represents the culmination of everything that began that night, when your brother chose to dismiss your service in front of people who could recognize its true value. As I hung up the phone after that conversation, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with Marcus's cruel comment at his rehearsal dinner. What he'd intended as humiliation had become the catalyst for career advancement beyond anything I'd previously imagined. His attempt to diminish me in front of Admiral Richardson had instead led to recognition, mentorship, and opportunities that would define the rest of my military career. The irony was complete, but more important was the growth and healing that had occurred within my family. Marcus's transformation from dismissive critic to proud defender represented a kind of redemption that benefited everyone involved. My parents' newfound understanding and respect had healed wounds I'd carried for years. And Admiral Richardson's mentorship had provided professional guidance that accelerated my career while also offering the family acceptance I'd always craved. The promotion ceremony approached rapidly, and preparations began for what would be both a professional milestone and a family celebration. For the first time in my military career, I knew that my family would be present not out of obligation, but out of genuine pride and understanding of what the achievement represented. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for a Friday morning at the Pentagon, in the same conference room where I'd given my first major briefing to senior leadership. Admiral Richardson had arranged for the ceremony to take place during a brief break in the Joint Task Force's quarterly review, ensuring that my colleagues and superiors would be present to witness this career milestone. 3 weeks before the ceremony, Marcus called with a request that surprised me. "Sarah, I've been thinking about your promotion, and I want to do something special for you. Rebecca and I would like to host a celebration dinner afterward, somewhere nice, with the whole family. But more than that, I want to understand what this promotion means, what commander rank represents in the Navy." This was a complete reversal from the brother, who'd once dismissed my military achievements as meaningless. Marcus was now actively seeking to understand the significance of my career advancement, not just to offer appropriate congratulations, but because he genuinely wanted to comprehend what I'd accomplished. "Commander is a significant milestone," I explained. "It represents senior leadership responsibility, typically command of major units or key staff positions. The early promotion means the Navy sees exceptional potential for future advancement to flag rank." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "So this isn't just a routine promotion. This is recognition that you're among the top officers in your field." "That's right. And Marcus, having family there who understand what it represents, will mean everything to me." The conversation that followed was one of the most meaningful we'd ever had. Marcus asked detailed questions about naval rank structure, about what responsibilities I'd be taking on as a commander, about how this promotion positioned me for future assignments. His curiosity was genuine, his respect evident, his pride unmistakable. "I want Elena to understand this when she's older," he said, referring to his daughter who was now walking and beginning to form her first words. "I want her to know that her Aunt Sarah achieved something extraordinary, that she earned recognition for excellence in one of the most demanding and important careers possible." The planning for the promotion ceremony became a family affair in ways I'd never experienced before. My mother called to discuss what she should wear, wanting to ensure her appearance was appropriate for a Pentagon ceremony. My father researched naval traditions and protocols, determined to understand the significance of each element of the promotion process. But the most touching preparation came from Rebecca, who contacted Admiral Richardson's aide to learn about military ceremony etiquette. She wanted to ensure that the family's presence enhanced rather than detracted from the formal nature of the occasion. Her attention to these details reflected a respect for military traditions that my biological family was still learning to appreciate. The week before the ceremony, I received an unexpected call from Captain Morrison. "Commander Sarah Chen," he said, using my new title for the first time. "I wanted to inform you personally that your promotion has generated considerable interest at senior levels. The Chief of Naval Operations Office has specifically noted the exceptional nature of your early advancement." He explained that my promotion package had been reviewed not just by the Standard Promotion Board, but by a special panel that evaluated officers for accelerated advancement. The unanimous recommendation for early promotion, combined with Admiral Richardson's detailed endorsement, had created what Captain Morrison described as, quote, "unprecedented enthusiasm for my future potential. There's already discussion about your next assignment after the task force concludes," he continued. "Positions that would normally go to officers with significantly more time and grade. Your performance has convinced senior leadership that you're ready for responsibilities typically reserved for much more senior commanders." This information was both thrilling and daunting. Accelerated career progression meant increased responsibility and visibility, but also heightened expectations and scrutiny. Every assignment, every decision, every performance evaluation would be examined through the lens of whether I justified the Navy's investment in my rapid advancement. The night before the promotion ceremony, Admiral Richardson invited me to dinner at his quarters in Arlington. It was a small gathering that included Rebecca and Marcus, along with Admiral Richardson's wife, Catherine, whom I was meeting for the first time. The evening was both personal and professional, a blend of family celebration and military mentorship. "Sarah," Admiral Richardson said as we sat in his study after dinner, "tomorrow represents more than just a promotion ceremony. It's validation of a career path that your own family once questioned. Recognition from an institution that values excellence and dedication above all else." He paused, looking at Marcus, who was listening intently to every word. "But more importantly, it's proof that merit and character ultimately prevail, regardless of who believes in you initially. The Navy recognized your worth independent of family support, though I'm glad to see that support has now been earned." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering his past dismissiveness, but Admiral Richardson's tone wasn't accusatory. Instead, it was instructive, helping my brother understand both what had been lost through years of misunderstanding and what had been gained through his recent growth. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "I know I failed Sarah for too many years. I let my own limited perspective blind me to her achievements and dedication. But I want you to know that I'm committed to understanding and supporting her career going forward." Admiral Richardson nodded approvingly. "Marcus, the fact that you recognize past mistakes and are working to correct them speaks well of your character. Military families understand that service requires sacrifices from everyone, not just the person in uniform. Sarah's success tomorrow is also an opportunity for her entire family to celebrate what she's accomplished." The conversation that evening helped establish ground rules for ongoing family relationships that would support rather than undermine my military career. Admiral Richardson's guidance wasn't just about my professional development. It was about creating family dynamics that would sustain me through future challenges and achievements. The morning of the promotion ceremony arrived with the crisp clarity of a perfect autumn day in Washington. I arrived at the Pentagon early, wearing my dress blue uniform for what would be the last time with Lieutenant Commander insignia. The familiar weight of the uniform felt different somehow, charged with anticipation for the milestone it was about to witness. My family arrived precisely on time, dressed appropriately, and clearly nervous about being in such a formal military environment. Marcus wore his best suit and tie, while my parents had obviously invested considerable thought in their appearance. Rebecca looked elegant and confident, her experience as Admiral Richardson's daughter evident in her comfortable bearing within military settings. The ceremony itself was relatively brief, but profoundly meaningful. Admiral Richardson began with remarks about the significance of promotion to commander rank, explaining to the assembled audience that such advancement represented the Navy's confidence in an officer's ability to assume significant leadership responsibilities. "Commander-Select Chen," he said, addressing me directly, "your promotion today reflects exceptional performance throughout your career, but particularly your outstanding contributions to naval intelligence operations over the past 18 months. Your analytical capabilities, leadership potential, and ability to communicate complex technical information to senior decision-makers have earned recognition at the highest levels of naval leadership." The formal reading of my promotion orders followed, detailing my new rank and the responsibilities it entailed. As Admiral Richardson spoke the traditional words that formally advanced me to commander, I felt the weight of achievement and expectations settling on my shoulders, like the new rank insignia that would shortly replace my current ones. The moment of pinning on the new insignia was deeply emotional. Admiral Richardson removed my lieutenant commander bars and replaced them with the gold oak leaves of a commander, his movements precise and ceremonial. As he stepped back and rendered a salute to my new rank, I returned it with pride and gratitude that went far beyond professional courtesy. But the moment that meant the most came immediately afterward, when my family approached for congratulations. Marcus stepped forward first, his face serious, with emotion and respect. "Commander Chen," he said formally, using my new rank and title, "I'm proud to call you my sister." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of transformation, forgiveness, and genuine respect. This was the brother who'd once mocked my dress-up career, now addressing me with the full dignity my rank deserved. The change wasn't just surface politeness. It reflected a fundamental shift in how he viewed both my service and military leadership generally. My parents followed, their congratulations warm and heartfelt. Dad shook my hand firmly and said, "Commander Chen, your mother and I are honored to be your parents." The formal address might have seemed strange from family members, but in the context of a military ceremony, it demonstrated their understanding of the significance of the occasion and their respect for what I'd achieved. The reception following the ceremony provided opportunities for my family to interact with my colleagues and superiors in informal settings. I watched with pride as my parents and Marcus engaged in conversations about naval operations, intelligence work, and military service generally. They asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively to explanations, and demonstrated genuine interest in understanding the environment where I'd built my career. Captain Morrison spent considerable time talking with my father about the strategic importance of naval intelligence, helping him understand how my work contributed to national security objectives. "Your daughter," he told Dad, "represents the very best of what we look for in senior officers. Her combination of technical expertise and leadership capability is exactly what the Navy needs for future challenges." Admiral Richardson's wife, Catherine, took my mother aside for a conversation about military life from a family perspective. As someone who'd supported her husband through a distinguished career that included multiple deployments and high-stress assignments, she could offer insights into the unique aspects of military service that civilian families often struggle to understand. "Military service requires sacrifice from the entire family," Catherine explained to my mother. "But it also provides opportunities for service, achievement, and personal growth that few other careers can match. Sarah has chosen a path that will challenge her, fulfill her, and allow her to make contributions that truly matter." These conversations were building bridges of understanding that would support my career for years to come. My family was developing the knowledge and perspective necessary to appreciate not just my current achievements, but the future challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The celebration dinner Marcus and Rebecca hosted that evening was held at one of Washington's finest restaurants, a place elegant enough to honor the significance of the occasion, while intimate enough for meaningful family conversation. The guest list included immediate family, plus Admiral Richardson and Catherine, creating a gathering that blended military tradition with family celebration. Marcus had clearly put considerable thought into the dinner, arranging for a private dining room and coordinating with the restaurant to ensure appropriate military courtesies. When we were seated, he stood to offer a toast that demonstrated how much his understanding had evolved. "Tonight we celebrate Commander Sarah Chen," he began. "But we're also celebrating something larger. We're honoring the values of service, sacrifice, and dedication that she embodies. For too many years, I failed to understand what those values meant, what they required, and what they accomplished." He paused, looking directly at me. "Sarah, your promotion to commander represents recognition from an institution that demands excellence and rewards merit. But for me, it represents something more personal. It's proof that character and dedication ultimately prevail, regardless of who believes in you initially." The toast that followed was heartfelt and appropriate, acknowledging both my professional achievement and the family growth that had made this celebration possible. Admiral Richardson responded with his own toast, emphasizing the significance of family support for military success and the importance of understanding military service as a noble calling. The dinner conversation ranged across topics from naval strategy to family memories, blending military discussion with personal stories in ways that felt natural and inclusive. My family was learning to navigate conversations about classified work, understanding which topics I could discuss and which required discretion. But the most meaningful part of the evening came during a quiet moment when Admiral Richardson pulled me aside. "Commander Chen," he said, "I want you to understand that tonight represents more than just career advancement. It's validation of everything you've worked toward, recognition of capabilities that will serve the Navy for decades to come." He continued, "But I also want you to understand the broader significance of what's happened here. Your family's transformation, their growing appreciation for military service, that's something that extends beyond your personal relationships. They're becoming advocates for military families, people who understand and can explain to others why service matters." This observation helped me realize that the changes in my family weren't just about healing our personal relationships. They were about creating understanding and support for military service that would influence other families, other relationships, other people who might be struggling to appreciate the sacrifices and achievements of service members in their own lives. The evening concluded with plans for future gatherings, ongoing family celebrations that would include military colleagues and traditions. Admiral Richardson extended invitations for my family to attend other military ceremonies and events, opportunities to deepen their understanding and appreciation of naval service. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus approached me one final time. "Sarah, Commander Chen, I want you to know that tonight has been one of the proudest moments of my life. Not just because of your promotion, but because I finally understand what I should have recognized years ago. You've dedicated your life to something that truly matters, and I'm honored to be your brother." The promotion ceremony and celebration dinner marked a complete transformation in my family relationships, but they also established a foundation for future growth and support. My parents and Marcus had developed genuine appreciation for military service that would sustain their understanding through future deployments, assignments, and challenges. More importantly, they'd become advocates for military families within their own social circles, people who could explain to others why service matters and what it requires. The ripple effects of Admiral Richardson's salute at Marcus's rehearsal dinner were continuing to expand, creating understanding and support that extended far beyond our immediate family. The new rank brought immediate changes in responsibility and expectations. Within a week of the promotion ceremony, I was briefing senior officials on intelligence matters that would previously have been handled by more senior officers. The confidence my family now showed in my career translated into increased professional confidence that enhanced every aspect of my performance. The journey from that humiliating moment at the rehearsal dinner to this career milestone had transformed not just my professional trajectory, but my entire understanding of family, respect, and recognition. Admiral Richardson's simple gesture of saluting me had initiated changes that continued to unfold, creating opportunities and relationships that would influence the rest of my life. 6 months after my promotion to commander, the Navy offered me an assignment that would test everything I'd learned about leadership, family support, and personal resilience. The position was executive officer of a guided missile destroyer, USS Tempest, preparing for deployment to the Western Pacific. It was exactly the kind of command track assignment that would position me for future ship command, but it also meant 18 months away from the family relationships I'd worked so hard to rebuild. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as my family had finally learned to appreciate and support my naval career, I was being asked to take an assignment that would separate us for extended periods. The old Marcus would have seen this as confirmation that military service was incompatible with normal family life. But the transformed Marcus who called to congratulate me on the assignment surprised me with his mature perspective. "Sarah, Commander Chen," he said, using my rank naturally now, "Rebecca and I have been talking about this deployment, and we want you to know that we understand why you have to go." Admiral Richardson explained to us that command track assignments like this are essential for officers who want to lead ships and sailors. "We're proud that the Navy trusts you with this level of responsibility." His response demonstrated how much his understanding of military service had evolved. Instead of viewing the deployment as an unnecessary separation, he saw it as evidence of the Navy's confidence in my abilities. The brother who'd once mocked my career was now encouraging me to pursue opportunities that would advance it, even when those opportunities required personal sacrifice. My parents' reaction was equally supportive, though tinged with the natural concern any parents would feel about their daughter deploying to potentially dangerous regions. Dad called to express both pride and worry, his voice carrying emotions he'd rarely shown during my earlier deployments when my career had seemed less significant to him. "Commander, we know this assignment is important for your career," he said, "but we also want you to know that we'll be thinking about you every day you're gone. We've been reading about the tensions in the South China Sea, and we understand that you'll be dealing with serious situations that could affect international relations." This level of engagement with my military assignments was unprecedented. Previously, my family had shown little interest in where I was deployed or what missions I was supporting. But now they were actively following international news that related to my work, trying to understand the strategic context of my assignments. The preparation for taking over as executive officer of USS Tempest required intensive training and briefings that consumed most of my time for the following 3 months. The ship was completing a major maintenance period and would be conducting extensive training exercises before deployment. As second in command, I would be responsible for the daily operations of over 300 sailors and the material condition of a sophisticated warship. Admiral Richardson provided guidance that proved invaluable during this transition period. "Commander Chen," he said during one of our regular mentoring sessions, "your new position will test every leadership skill you've developed, plus some you haven't discovered yet. But more importantly, it will demonstrate whether you have the command presence necessary for future ship command." He explained that serving as executive officer was essentially an extended audition for command, a chance to prove that I could manage the complex human and technical systems that made a modern warship effective. Success in this role would virtually guarantee selection for command of my own ship within a few years. "The deployment will also test your family relationships in new ways," Admiral Richardson continued. "Extended separation is one of the greatest challenges military families face. But from what I've observed, your family now has the understanding and commitment necessary to support you through this deployment." The final month before deployment brought a series of farewell gatherings that would have been unimaginable during my earlier career. My parents hosted a dinner party specifically to honor my upcoming assignment, inviting extended family and friends to learn about my new responsibilities and express their support. Marcus and Rebecca organized a more intimate gathering that included several of my Navy colleagues, creating opportunities for my family to interact with the people I'd be serving alongside. These events weren't just social occasions. They were demonstrations of family pride and support that strengthened my confidence as I prepared for one of the most challenging assignments of my career. The departure ceremony was held on a pier at Naval Station Norfolk, with families gathered to say goodbye to sailors deploying for extended operations. Unlike previous deployments, when my family's presence had felt obligatory and uncomfortable, this farewell was marked by genuine emotion and understanding. My parents had driven down from Pennsylvania specifically for the ceremony, while Marcus and Rebecca flew in with baby Elena, who was now old enough to wave goodbye even if she couldn't understand what was happening. The sight of my entire family gathered to support my deployment created a sense of belonging I'd never experienced during previous assignments. Admiral Richardson attended the ceremony as well, not in any official capacity but as a family friend and mentor. His presence reinforced the professional significance of my assignment, while also demonstrating the personal relationships that had grown from that first meeting at Marcus's rehearsal dinner. The goodbye conversations were emotional but positive, focused on pride in my achievements rather than regret about separation. Marcus pulled me aside for a private moment that captured how much our relationship had changed. "Commander Chen," he said formally, then shifted to a more personal tone. "Sarah, I want you to know that Elena's first words included, Aunt Navy. She associates you with something important and honorable, something she'll grow up respecting and perhaps aspiring to herself." He continued, "When you get back from this deployment, whenever that is, you'll find a family that understands your service better, supports it more completely, and takes pride in every achievement you earn." That's a promise. The deployment itself proved to be everything Admiral Richardson had predicted, and more. USS Tempest operated in some of the most strategically important and potentially dangerous waters in the world, conducting freedom of navigation operations that directly challenged Chinese territorial claims in the South China Sea. As executive officer, I was responsible for ensuring the ship's readiness for any situation we might encounter, from routine port visits to potential combat operations. The crew looked to me for leadership, guidance, and confidence during high-stress situations that tested everyone's training and professionalism. The communication with my family throughout the deployment demonstrated the strength of the relationships we'd rebuilt. Weekly video calls became family traditions, with Marcus and Rebecca ensuring that Elena maintained a connection with her deployed aunt. My parents sent regular care packages and letters that showed their genuine interest in my work and concern for my well-being. But the most meaningful communication came in the form of news articles and social media posts that my family shared with their friends and colleagues. Marcus had become an active advocate for military families within his professional and social circles, using his real estate business platform to promote understanding and support for service members. Rebecca started a blog about military spouse experiences that featured guest posts from service members, families, including regular updates about my deployment that helped civilian readers understand the realities of naval operations. Her writing combined personal insight with broader education about military service, creating awareness and appreciation within communities that had little direct military connection. The deployment included several high-profile operations that received media attention, though the classified nature of my work meant that my specific contributions couldn't be publicly acknowledged. However, Admiral Richardson maintained contact throughout the deployment, providing feedback on performance reports and strategic assessments that indicated exceptional professional growth. During one particularly challenging period when USS Tempest was involved in a tense standoff with Chinese naval forces, Admiral Richardson sent a personal message that reinforced both his professional confidence and personal support. "Commander Chen," his message read, "Your leadership during recent operations has been noted at the highest levels of naval command. Your family should know that you're representing the best traditions of naval service under the most demanding conditions." The message was shared with my family, providing them with official recognition of my performance during operations they were following through news reports. This kind of direct communication from senior leadership helped my parents and Marcus understand that my deployment wasn't just routine duty, but service in situations that directly affected national security. The homecoming 8 months later was triumphant, in ways that previous returns from deployment had never been. USS Tempest had completed all assigned missions successfully, earned commendations for operational excellence, and prepared for the next deployment cycle with enhanced capabilities and confidence. My family's presence at the homecoming ceremony was more significant than the number of people might suggest. They were there not out of obligation, but out of genuine pride and understanding of what I'd accomplished. Admiral Richardson attended as well, his presence serving as both professional recognition and family support. The reunion dinner that evening was held at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated my promotion to commander, creating a sense of continuity and progress that marked how far we'd all come. The conversation included stories from the deployment, updates on family developments, and plans for future gatherings that would maintain the connections we'd built. But the most significant moment came when Marcus presented me with a gift that demonstrated his complete transformation in understanding military service. He'd commissioned a custom piece of art featuring USS Tempest, created by a veteran artist who specialized in naval subjects. The accompanying plaque read, "Commander Sarah Chen, USS Tempest, in recognition of service that makes family and nation proud." "I wanted you to have something that captures this moment," Marcus explained. "Not just your successful deployment, but the fact that you now have a family that understands what you do and why it matters. This piece will always remind you that your service is appreciated and supported by the people who love you most." The gift represented more than artistic appreciation. It was tangible proof of the respect and understanding that had replaced years of dismissal and misunderstanding. The brother who'd once mocked my dress-up career had invested time, money, and thought into honoring my military achievements. The performance evaluations from my deployment as executive officer were exceptional, positioning me for the next major milestone in my naval career: selection for command of my own ship. Admiral Richardson's mentorship continued as I prepared for the command selection process, providing insights into the evaluation criteria and expectations for prospective commanding officers. "Commander Chen," he said during one of our post-deployment meetings, "your performance as executive officer has confirmed everything I observed that first night at the rehearsal dinner. You have the leadership capability, technical competence, and personal character necessary for command. The question isn't whether you'll be selected, but which ship you'll be privileged to command." The command selection process would take several months, during which I would continue serving in challenging assignments that tested different aspects of leadership and professional capability. But regardless of the outcome, the deployment had proven that I could excel in the most demanding naval assignments, while maintaining the family relationships that provided essential personal support. The journey from that humiliating moment at Marcus's rehearsal dinner to successful completion of a challenging deployment had transformed every aspect of my life. Professional recognition from Admiral Richardson had initiated changes that continued to unfold, creating opportunities, relationships, and understanding that would influence the rest of my naval career. The family support that had once been absent was now a source of strength that enhanced rather than complicated my military service. Marcus's transformation from dismissive critic to proud advocate represented growth that benefited everyone involved, while my parents' newfound appreciation provided emotional foundation that sustained me through the most challenging assignments. Most importantly, I'd learned that respect and recognition, once earned, create momentum that extends far beyond individual achievements. Admiral Richardson's salute at the rehearsal dinner had initiated a chain of events that continued to generate opportunities, support, and understanding years after that first moment of public acknowledgement. 2 years later, I stood on the bridge of USS Phoenix as her commanding officer, watching the sunrise over Pearl Harbor as we prepared for our first deployment under my command. The gold oak leaves of commander had been replaced by the silver eagles of captain, a promotion that came with Admiral Richardson's personal congratulations and my family's unrestrained celebration. Marcus had brought Elena, now 4 years old, to the change of command ceremony 6 months earlier. As I assumed command of the guided missile cruiser, Elena had whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That's my aunt, Captain." The pride in her voice echoed the transformation that had begun with her grandfather's salute at that rehearsal dinner years ago. The Navy had offered me command of Phoenix based on my exceptional performance as executive officer and subsequent assignments that had tested every aspect of my leadership capability. Admiral Richardson's continued mentorship had been instrumental, but the selection ultimately reflected merit and potential that the Navy valued, regardless of personal connections. My parents attended every major ceremony now, understanding the significance of each milestone in ways they'd never grasped before. Dad had started telling his Gulf partners about his daughter, the ship captain, while Mom had joined a military families support group where she helped other parents navigate the complexities of having children in service. Marcus had become something more than a supportive brother. He'd become an advocate for military families within his business community. His real estate company now offered special programs for military buyers, and he regularly spoke at Chamber of Commerce events about the economic benefits of supporting military installations and families. The change in our family dynamics had created ripple effects that extended far beyond personal relationships. Rebecca's blog about military life had attracted national attention, leading to speaking engagements and consulting opportunities that helped civilian communities better understand and support military families. Admiral Richardson retired from active duty but remained connected to our family as a mentor and friend. His salute at the rehearsal dinner had been the catalyst for transformations none of us could have predicted, creating relationships and opportunities that would influence generations. Standing on the bridge of my ship, preparing to lead 300 sailors on missions that would directly impact national security, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The brother who'd once called me a loser was now my fiercest advocate. The family that had dismissed my service now took pride in every achievement. The admiral who'd saluted me had become the father figure I'd never expected to find. But perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that respect, once earned, multiplies in ways that transform not just individual relationships but entire communities. The recognition Admiral Richardson had given me that night had created understanding that spread far beyond our family, touching other families, other relationships, other people who needed to see military service valued and respected. The sun climbed higher over Pearl Harbor as USS Phoenix prepared to get underway. The woman my brother had called a loser was now Captain Sarah Chen, commanding officer of one of the Navy's most advanced warships. The transformation was complete, but the story of respect, recognition, and family healing would continue for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.